my focus.
Page 4. To accomplish my own and others' aim, I generate a mind seeking enlightenment. To accomplish my own and others' aim, I generate a mind seeking enlightenment. Dagdag chandon ladu dagi jamchub senkietu. For Mirrors, page 6. May all sentient beings in happiness and causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in dignity, free from the desire for friends and hatred for enemies.
Okay. So I thought a little bit about what we talked about before, the last question, and just to go into this one more time, especially about, the I and then the moments of I. Shoshana and I, we just talked about it briefly after class, and what she said was, well, actually, when I accumulated action now, when this body and mind, right, this entity that I call I, does something, whatever experiences it in the future is not the same I, right? It's like a totally different person. So that's actually a very important and very interesting thought. And there is, with this, I mean, this is a very important thought and one should really reflect on it, but there is a danger of falling to an extreme of nihilism, as with any of the thoughts. Like, how do I care if what I do right now, the person who's going to experience it is not me, I can just do anything, right? But that is just not asserting the conventionally existent I. And any time when you're in meditation, and that's not what Shoshana said, that was just me saying, this is the danger. So I think any time when this happens, there's a sense of, and also our discussion here with Leora, or both Leoras, I asked you also Leora, right? Yeah, with both Leoras, the discussion of, well, if there's just, cause and effect, and then our actions are the result of certain, causes in the past, and there's no real self controlling it, it's almost like, well, there's nothing there, right? And I think those are the moments that you feel, oh, I don't exist. And then just take a needle and hold yourself. Right? I mean, it's almost like it can't be there. But, of course, we do exist, just not in the way in which we feel we do exist. And it is so hard to find a balance. And it's been said in the scriptures, even by beings who are highly realized, that there's fear. When they get to understand that their self is not there, there's actually fear there. It's like you're losing yourself. I mean, there's only fear because not only is there a holding on to itself that doesn't exist, but there's attachment to that too. So if that is kind of becoming less clear by thinking about it, fear sets in because we're attached to that. It's just as our loved ones that we're very attached to, when that person threatens to leave us, we're scared, right? We're very attached to someone, if they say they're going to leave us, oh my God, I can't be without it. It's fear. So they say this fear goes until a very high level. Even beings who have reached a very high level, they still have that fear. Subtler levels, but still there. And also what we need, yes?
Can I ask something? Yeah. From my short experience...
Just say it and I'll repeat it, yeah.
From my short experience, when I touch something that is reality, that is real, it has a sense of relief. It feels good.
So from your short experience...
Why when we have this touch, when we touch this no self, why does it make us fear? But not a sense of relief. This is the truth, isn't it? So
okay. So what Leora is saying, basically, why we're saying that there's a sense of fear, because the way she feels about it is a sense of relief.
Oh, no. That's what she...
No, that's not what you're saying? Yeah. Yeah.
Feels a relief?
Yeah.
It's a sense of relief, like a liberating. It's liberating, she's saying.
yeah,
Yeah.
Because if I touch something that is true, so it makes me feel good, because the truth has a power of relaxing or feeling good about it. So
In
why?
this case,
The case of like not finding the self when you look for it. I think she's saying, I just claimed that it's described that some people, when they get really closer to not understanding the self, there's almost like there's a fear. There's a fear there. And then Leora's response is, well, from her own experience, it's more a sense of relief because this is the truth, right? Getting closer to the truth, that is just, something to be happy about and, a sense of relief. Okay, so there's something to that too. Not just the fact that this is the truth. I mean, first of all, we need to come to first an experience that it is the truth. But secondly, it's also, of course, if there's nothing to be found, there's a sense of, I don't need to worry, right? I mean, I don't need to be so on my guard all day long. I don't need to be so worried. I don't need to, oftentimes with lots of people around, especially, we're kind of, there's a sense of I have to pay attention, I have to be, worried. And there is that, coarser and subtler levels of that. So there's relief of that, just that, oh my God, I don't need to worry. But, and you see, I think there's different layers of understanding going deeper and deeper. There's no self. You dig deeper. As I said, there is no quick fix. It's almost like peeling endless layers of skin of an onion, right? Coarser, and they get subtler and subtler and subtler. And there's I don't know. I can only see what's in the scriptures where they describe there's sometimes a sense of fear. And someone said it in the last group. I think one lady said, "Oh, that's scary." Kind of, there's like this spontaneous response. "Oh, that's scary." So I think it just depends. Yeah, there's certain things we're attached about ourselves. When they kind of go too, oh, there's a sense of loss. Yeah, because we're very, very complicated. There's a lot of layers there. And a lot of our sense of self is unconscious, subconscious. It's quite subconscious. And we need to first bring it up to then investigate it. We have such a subconscious notion of being a woman, for example. I so strongly identify with being a woman. Yeah, and that's quite subconscious. Yeah, I'm not that conscious about it at all times. So there's a lot of layers that we need to, it's a coarser level and go deeper and deeper and deeper. Yeah, so this is definitely taking time. But I totally agree that it makes sense. There's a degree of, whoa, I can relax. Who cares what others think about me? And, there's nothing to worry about. But anyway, there's some other thing I was thinking about. Thinking in terms of the self, in terms of time. Myself yesterday, the self now, the self tomorrow, all these moments in time. It's actually, each one is totally separate, right? They do give rise one to the next, but we have the sense there's a continuation, right? But there actually isn't. And it reminds me of a computer. I sit in front of my computer and there's a line. And there seems to be this solid, continuous line, but actually it's just dots of pixels, isn't it, right? Just dots of pixels. Okay, it's just different dots. And there appears to me, to me it appears to be a line, and then I perceive it as a solid line. So likewise, with our life, with us as a person, there's actually just these moments of consciousness, moments of body, right? Moments of consciousness, moments of body, and each giving rise to the next, giving rise to the next. And it appears to us as if some permanent continuum. There's actually a contradiction in terminology. A continuum, that's permanent, right? A continuum, but permanent. A continuum implies this kind of changing moment by moment, but continuing on. Whereas if it's permanent, it's not changing. And what has been a good example of this has been my dad's disease. My dad had a stroke some years ago, a really bad stroke, and he's paralyzed now and can't speak. So his brain has been greatly damaged, and I was always very close to my dad, to a degree that Gengetzeler, when he went to Germany and he saw us talk without understanding a word, he was like, whoa, you two communicate in such a special way. Sometimes you're very, very close to a parent or to someone, and there was this connection between us. And ever since he had the stroke, he changed mentally. He's actually not the same kind of person. There's some change. He is and he isn't. That which I connected to before, I don't feel it that much anymore, if it's there at all. I wonder whether it's just my memory. And for a long time I was thinking, where is it? Somewhere inside, it must be hidden. And then I thought, wait a minute. How could I think that is the sense of a self that's in there? That was there before, and now it's still somewhere there. But, it's just his mind has changed. So his brain has changed, therefore his mind has changed, and he's different now. Yeah, there was never such a self, that self that I identified with, that's the one I connect with, I feel so close to, I can communicate with. That was like a projection of my mind. It was mind and body, and we could communicate really well. But I had this extra sense of a self there. And when he had the stroke, I was looking for it. Oh, it's hidden somewhere. You can't let it out. And then I realized, no, this is just my adding something there. The special dadness, special from body and mind, that's sitting in there. And the same notion I had with the Dalai Lama, with the 14th Dalai Lama. Identify this something about the 14th Dalai Lama. beyond words, of course, but we can kind of identify with that kindness and that jolliness and, everything we... And then I look at the picture from the 13th Dalai Lama and I'm like, where is it? He looks so stern, with this mustache and so serious, right? And I don't see it. And sometimes with a reincarnation, when someone passes away, what you associate with that person, that self, when they're reincarnated and they're recognized, you don't find that in the next person. And then it's like, no, it can't be the reincarnation. I don't feel that. But that was just extracting something there. Of course, the mind and body changes. It's these people, they come, reincarnations, if they're like highly realized bodhisattvas, they come back for our own sake. So the way they manifest is different every time because, people are different, the situation is different. They're not always the same. So when these lamas, when they pass away, so with the 13th Dalai Lama, there's this, and then there's descriptions of him too. It's not just the picture. He's very stern. He's very serious. So I'm kind of getting a sense of a self that's very serious, very stern. And then I think of now the Dalai Lama, and it's like, well, that's the same continuum, right? So where's that stern self gone? But of course, it's different. It's a different mind, a different body. Why do you expect to be there some continuum, right? A solid kind of continuum. And the same with people who are brain dead, There's different senses, of course. What this doesn't mean. People who are in a coma, it could be that just some part of their brain is damaged and some coarse consciousness is still there. So what we identify with the past, this coarse consciousness is still there, it just cannot communicate. But it could be also that the brain is damaged to such a degree that the coarse consciousness is gone. That means the person as we know him or her is gone, right? It couldn't be sitting inside because there is no self separate from the two. And also, sometimes when I think, oh, if I was reborn as a dog, that'd be awful. As if my human eye could be sitting in a dog, kind of trapped in a dog. But that's just not possible. It's almost like I take my human mind with me, part of my brain with me, and enter that dog, right? But that's impossible, So it's just this sense of an I that I have, But right now, I'd be sitting in the dog's body. I have a tail and, kind of really small. I won't ever have that sense because that I won't continue on. It doesn't exist, right? So these are all examples of senses of an I where we need to really catch it, those times when we catch ourselves thinking in that way, along the lines of a mind that perceives such a self. And oftentimes it's so deeply entrenched that we don't even identify it. So it takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of learning. So now some people, when they hear about Buddhism, they think, study, learning? I'm here to meditate. But I think that's a mistake. To think learning has to do something with just being in the mind, just being a brain, like an academic thing, just a brain game. Here, the kind of learning we're talking about is not that. It's not that. It's taking it to the heart. You definitely have people who just have it in the mind. Just as you have people who meditate all the time, but it's just doing this, They do 3 years, come out, and they're still the same person. No transformation. You can do retreats. You can sit in a cave for 50 years. If you don't allow whatever you do, allow that to affect your mind, you're just doing the physical stuff. You're not really doing anything. Same is true for learning. You need whatever you learn about affect your mind. So even Atisha said, Atisha, who's the father of the Tibetans, of all the Tibetan traditions. Remember from last course, for those of you who are here, I wrote just some of these lines, that learning is so important, but it's not an intellectual kind of learning. That's not what we mean with this. But, he says, no matter how learned you are, strive to learn more. That's in the Jewel Garland of Dialogues, the text we studied last time, Atisha and Jomtamba speaking. So Atisha saying, no matter how learned you are, strive to learn more. Turn the wheel of reading regularly. The wheel of reading. Distill the essence of everything and take it to heart. Yeah? Not just in the mind. Take it to heart. Expound on the ocean of expository collections. Expound on the ocean of scriptures. Then he goes on to say, where there's no guide, sometimes we just don't have a guide physically around. Listen by reading to yourself. Right? So you should be listening. Well, you read to yourself. These are the words of some of the great masters. Uphold the meaning of the words by taking them to heart. Again, right? Don't just study, take it to heart. Drum, he says, Drumtamba, his disciple, even if one observes morality with faith and gives charity, even if one is very generous, if one fails to seek the ocean of learning, it is possible that one may feel through the gaps. One may not know the levels and the path oneself. Yeah, we may be generous and kind and have faith, but if we don't have a good understanding of what all this is about, all the nitty-gritty details, we may go astray. We fall through the gaps. We're trying to walk the Dharma here. We're not used to this. This is not what we've been doing for generations, for eons. Yeah? Now we're moving our mind in a different direction, and we need to really know the dangers. We need to really know this is compassion and not this. It's so easy to be fooled by thinking I'm compassionate. It's so easy to be fooled by I'm generous, but we really need to understand those minds, what they really mean. Yeah? Selflessness, to not fall into an extreme. Bodhicitta. In Dharamsala, we studied bodhicitta for 2 months. Because it's so easy to think bodhicitta is just thinking, may I be enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings. I can think that. Oh, may I be enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings. I have bodhicitta. No, no. There's so much more to it. So we need to understand all the steps that lead us there. So if we don't have any of the causes, how could we have the result of bodhicitta? Right? There's so much to it. So it's so easy to think, oh, I've entered the Mahayana path. Ooh. Oh, that was easy. I mean, no way. Yeah, it's not easy. So do you know exactly? And you don't, nowadays we have mobile phones, so if you have a teacher, you can maybe call up and say, I just had that experience, is that the right thing? Right? But oftentimes we don't have that. So if you have your inner wisdom, learning about these things, oh, these are the steps of mind. This is where I have to be careful. All right, okay. Just like a skillful doctor treating him or herself. Yeah? You know the symptoms, you know the side effects. Then you're pretty safe there. And this is what one great meditator said, who came to our class once. He's an amazing meditator, Geshe Thupten Pesa. I mean, you go to the monasteries in South India, hardly anyone who doesn't know him. And he never aimed for the highest degree, couldn't be bothered. Now he's just, meditating. But he said, if you have a good understanding, good learning, you don't need to rely on a guide in the sense that you always need to ask questions. You still rely on them mentally, of course, but you don't need to always be in their presence and kind of go, oh, what's next, what's next, what's next? You know. And then they guide you in a way that is not necessarily you have to see them physically. You communicate in a different way. Yeah? So Milarepa and Marpa are such a great example. How much time did Milarepa really spend around Marpa? In the beginning, a lot of time. You had to learn, you had to listen and so forth. And then he went off, and sometimes for years he didn't see Marpa. He had visions of Marpa. He in his mind, he was always close to him. But sometimes for a long time he didn't see him, because he had the maturity that he didn't need to physically be close. So this is something that really matures us. And especially Israelis. It's so easy to talk about Israelis with this because there's a strong sense that this is important to learn, to study. It's very much part of your culture. And I'm impressed, like for example, Shachar, like last time when we talked, he'd learned Tibetan already, in the meantime. He knew so many things, and I don't think he learned those in Dharamsala. Some of them he did, but I was there when he was there. I know what he learned. A lot of it, I think he through learning and while he was here. See, he made the time. He's got a kid, he's got a wife. But if you maybe spend an hour less doing some of the things we usually do, maybe an hour or two a day, that's a lot. Taking a text, reading about those things, about especially emptiness, about, and your mind, you get deeper and deeper and deeper. It's all these causes and conditions that help you to go deeper. You need to, of course, reflect then. Spend some time reflection. Spend some time doing active kind of compassion, acting out compassion. Because if you act out compassion, this is another way of doing this. So the mind of the learning helps you to get a better understanding. Look at it from different angles. Angles that maybe you haven't taken into consideration yet. Then you internalize them. Then you actively practice compassion. You're actively putting yourself into the other person's shoes. Which then helps you to understand that there really isn't something so solid there, because you move away from this I. You move towards others. And one of my classmates, he's a very high Rinpoche, Matu Rinpoche, he's a very high Kagyu Lama. He's actually one of the lamas in the tradition there. And he's amazing. Very young. I mean, we were classmates, you know, like when we debated with each other. It was very, you know, he was just a young person, and I never thought he was really special. I mean, it was just the name he had. But sometimes he said these amazing things, you know. And he said one day, he said, you know, with the practice of compassion, you're really moving away from here and moving out towards others. And that helps you to realize that the chair is empty. That there's really actually nothing here, right? It kind of helps you. But it's this actively acting like a Buddha, right? I mean, we're emulating the Buddhas by being compassionate. Right now, our ignorance is actually keeping us from being compassionate. So we're doing these actions, and they in turn help our wisdom to grow again. So there's many different things we need to do. To just do one thing is like have just one cause for a flower. You know, you need many conditions for a flower to grow. Fertilizer, warmth, and so forth. Anyway, I just thought to share that with you. And I thought this is important to understand, that it's not all about just being quiet and just quieten the mind. There is times when we need to actively sit down and read and learn. And not learn from anyone. We learn from these great masters. These are blessed words, you know, like from the Dalai Lama, from His Holiness the Karmapa, from Sakya Tenzin Rinpoche, from you know, Daegu Khyentse Rinpoche. I mean, these great lamas from all the traditions, and not necessarily the high lamas. There's also some other ones, maybe less famous, but still amazing practitioners. Anyway, just thought to remind you of that. So if you really want to understand emptiness, it takes a long time, but then there's lots of things we can be doing. Okay, but basically to get back to what we're talking about. So here, when we talk about ignorance being the root cause, we're actually here now more specifically talk about an ignorance that is able to then induce certain karma. So as I said previously, there are some types of karma. I'd like to say a few things about karma before we get into the actual karma we're talking about here. But usually there's four qualifications in general of karma. The certainty of karma. Number 2 is the magnification of karma. That karma magnifies somehow. And so Lama Tsongkhapa actually says, internal karma causation seems to involve a magnification that is not found in external causation, or not necessarily found in external causation. I'll say it again. Internal karmic causation, internal, that's referring to certain behavior, body, speech, and mind, leading to certain karmic results. So this internal karmic causation seems to involve a magnification that is not found in external causation, or not necessarily found in external causation. Yeah. So as I said, there are some external causes where a tiny seed has a great result, of like a huge apple tree. But with karmic seeds, it's like the longer they're there, the more they seem to be expanding. Yeah. So any small action can have great results. Any small positive action can have great results. Any small negative actions can have great results. So to always be careful, because they expand. Okay, then number 3 is, it is impossible to experience the effects of an action that you have not accumulated. It's impossible to experience something, some result that you have not accumulated. It's number 3. And number 4 is, actions you have done do not perish unless they're purified. Okay? So usually, unless they're purified, right? Okay, so this is something I need to say here, because there's only one good thing about negative karma. Only one good thing. It can be purified. It can be purified. So, which means, karma is not something permanent there. I mean, the karmic imprints that we have through positive actions. Yeah? And not just positive actions, it's very important because such is the power of the mind. Such is the power of the mind that we can direct the energy of our mind, and with the motivation to purify karma, we then engage in positive actions and we can actually purify the karma. So just engaging in positive action is not enough. It's actually our mind's supposed to be directed in that direction. Sometimes I'm sure positive actions can, just by themselves, get rid of some negative actions. But of course it's more effective if we want to really purify negative karma, to consciously think, I've done a lot of negative things. I've done them out of ignorance, but I've nevertheless done them. And I have deep regret for what I've done, the negativities I have accumulated. And I'm trying my best to not do them again. Yeah? With this set of mind, and then possibly taking refuge and doing the bodhicitta prayer. With that, your mind is put into a powerful spot where you can actually, with positive actions, overcome the negative ones. So they say prostrations is one very effective way of doing so, doing prostrations, because you actively, you have to do something that is hard. It's hard work, and it actually symbolizes, of course, most important is the internal prostration, where you kind of humble yourself and open yourself up to something greater. Yeah, this is kind of the purpose of prostrations. It's like this movement of going down. It's like, I always think of you want to pour some tea in a cup. You need to always lower the cup in order to pour it into the cup, right? So you have to lower yourself. So here it's just symbolic, that lowering yourself. It's just kind of having the humility to receive something that you perceive as something worthwhile and greater than yourself, possibly, whatever the teachings are. Anyway, so this is the symbol of that, and so doing prostration symbolizes that. So there's some virtue in doing that, and therefore you can counteract negative karma. But it doesn't mean you have to do prostrations. I mean, just being kind. I said it last time, I think. We wake up in the morning, you do your practice, and you set your mind towards the direction of positive actions, of body, speech, and mind, right? You kind of determine, this day I'll try my best to keep in mind the benefit of others. Yeah? And then possibly, if you do what I said previously, you regret your negative actions of the past, you take refuge, you generate bodhicitta, and kind of determine, I'll try my best to never do those negativities again. And may whatever positive action I engage in today purify my negativity. Then if you're in office, you have a full-time job, you can actually purify negativities while you're doing, whatever you're doing. Of course, we need to be mindful during those 8 hours and not be carried away, and, every now and then remind ourselves. But we can actually make our entire day a retreat. So try and keep the stress down, because the stress controls us, and then it's very hard to be mindful. But, trying to the best of your ability. Of course, choosing a job that is in itself already beneficial to others is definitely something, something good, helpful there. But even if it's kind of a neutral kind of job, being a butcher it's definitely a problem. But, just a neutral kind of job, you can make that neutral job beneficial with your motivation. And you can make it a purification practice. And even you're not monks and nuns, and even you don't have time to take off to do a retreat, you can attain definitely spiritual understandings, if not realizations. And I'm always reminded of one of our teacher's disciples. He had 2 disciples, or he had many disciples, but there's 2 that in this story kind of stick out. One was his personal attendant. He was always, running around, doing things, all day long. A teacher, asked him to do things. But with a very pure motivation, he would follow what his teacher told him to do. And the other one was always in meditation or retreat. And one day, the one who was always running around, I know there's different versions of the story, but the version that I kind of most familiar with is that he went to Atisha and said, I'd really like to do some retreat. I'm just not getting anywhere. Here I am my whole life, but I'm not, I'm scared when I die. I've not accumulated, I've no spiritual understanding. Whereas, this other person being in retreat, they have this opportunity. Please give me also this opportunity. And Atisha said, your understanding and your spiritual realizations are much higher than him by just doing what you do. So just sitting in meditation and just doing retreat, it's not what it's all about. It's like really how you apply this in every minute. And if your mind is totally, absorbed in the Dharma, then not being in a retreat situation is okay. It just depends on the mind, not on the external circumstances. They're just tools. So I think it's very, very important. So otherwise we think, I can't do Dharma, I have an 8-hour job, Or we come down to like, I can only practice half an hour a day. I mean, that's not enough, right? That's not enough, half an hour. I mean, if we added up our entire life, we end up, if we live for 70, 80 years and we only practice half an hour a day, how many months does that do of all our life? That's not enough. I can't do the math, I did that once, but I can't. Pardon?
It's a start.
It's a start, I totally agree, but if you have 24 hours, or at least, those hours when you don't sleep, you can do even more. Why not do it more, right? Why not do it more? Anyway, and with I said learning, as I said previously, I was thinking in my room, what would be a good example of learning, for example? So, in the situation that I was in for 16 years, kind of people do say, well, what is all this learning? What is all this learning about? Don't you think you had to practice? And it's a little bit like someone who learns about diet, about keeping a pure diet, and really understands what certain foods do to you. It's very difficult to go to McDonald's and just eat McDonald's food. It's very difficult because you're so into it. It's almost like you can feel how these weird carbs and the sugars can actually, and then at some point you can't eat it anymore. You just want to have healthy food and you start liking it. So likewise, with this very intense kind of study, I mean, I'm not saying that this actually affected me, but there's people who are really greatly affected, not in my case, but it was all day long, right? It's very difficult to really follow your anger if you know about the negativity of anger. It's like so much part of your life. So like, it's very hard at some point to just go ahead. And you see, the good thing about me having done the study is understanding that anyone can do it. If I can do it, anyone can do it. Because I'm not Tibetan, I was not raised there, I'm only of average intelligence, and trust me, I'm not humble, it's true. Honestly, I don't have anything more. So that's why I believe anyone can do it, whether Israeli, whether American, German, from any country, people can do it. Yeah? You just need to have the time, and you need to continue doing it. Yeah? So I can only encourage this. Learn, read as much as you can. Yeah? And spend time, of course, practicing, and balance it in a good way. Find your own balance. If you feel it's just all in the head, okay, then maybe just keep away a little bit. But try to do, all of that, balance it out. Anyway, so that was just something at the side. I can only just emphasize it, the importance of that. Anyway, so, but getting back to karma, so we talk about these 4 kind of qualities of karma, but there's more to it. There's different ways in looking at karma. So there's one way of differentiating karma by looking at it. There's virtuous karma, non-virtuous karma, and neutral karma. That's easy, right? Virtuous meaning non-harmful, non-virtuous meaning harmful, and neutral, neither harmful nor non-harmful. But then there's also actions or karmic actions that are done deliberately, intentionally. And then there are actions that are intended, but not done. Right? You just, in your mind, you intend to abuse this person, be harsh towards them, but then you actually never do it. That's an action where you intend to be rude to them, but you never do it. So you see the karmic effect, you never actually go out and say something horrible, you just plan it in your mind. So the effect is already different as opposed to an action that is intended and actually done. And then there are actions that are done, but not intentionally, right? I mean, we have an accident, we kill someone by accident. I mean, it happens, you drive a car, you have no intention whatsoever, you kill someone. It's not the same. There's some negativity there, yeah, because it's just the action that itself has some negativity, but the result is a lot, because there was no intention. There may be a tiny result, but not a bad one, not a huge, huge, horrible one. And so you may ask, well, that's not fair, stepping on an ant. That's not fair if we don't know about it. Well, we have this body. We have this body is a result of our action in the past. And what goes along with it, that we kill animals and insects. It's part of that. Sometimes we're bound to do negativity even though we don't intend to do. Does that make sense? That's the predicament we're in, having this kind of body right now, which has, of course, a result in actions of the past. And then there are actions that are neither done nor intended. They're not actions at all, of course. You can't have something that's not intended and not deliberate. But this is another way of looking at actions, right? Intended and actually done. Or just intended, not done, and so forth. Then there are actions where the intention is virtuous, but the execution of the action is non-virtuous, right? So, if you're a doctor, for example, and you need to get rid of some viruses and bacteria, which are said to be sentient, they're sentient beings. You have to kill certain worms to save a human being's life. The intention is to save different human beings' life, but the execution is the killing of other forms of life. That's also sometimes we have to make a choice. Where the intention is non-virtuous, but the execution of the action is virtuous. That too, right? Sometimes we're totally out of a very wrong motivation, we give charity. It's also possible. And sometimes both the action and the intention are virtuous, and sometimes the other way around. Of course, that's the best one. Both the intention and the action are virtuous. But the intention is always most important. Then there are actions of body, speech, and mind, of course. Again, another way of looking at them. And then there are actions which results are definitive and others which are indefinitive. So actions which are definitive are basically actions where the intention and the execution of the action are there. Deliberately done, it's the same. Then it's very, very, very clear. But karmic actions which are not so clear are actions which are done in dreams, for example. It's not like we consciously do it, we just dream about them. There's not much control there, right? Or actions done unconsciously. Again, the result is not definitively. So we have to think of one specific action of, say, for example, killing, right? Not even killing humans, I'm saying killing, of animals. So if unconsciously we kill, the result of killing is not definite. There's another result there. It's not saying there's no result, but the killing is not definitely that result of killing. So it has to be first-degree murder to be definitive, right? I mean, really like intended and everything. So it's always to do with the intention. Those done without intensity, right? You do it and immediately you regret it. Again, there's a difference. Someone forces you to do it. Again, there's a difference. It's not definitive. You do it forgetfully, or unconsciously, if you like. You purify it right away. Okay. You do it against your will, So anyway, you see how there's a lot of factors. I mean, to do negative action is easy, but there's also a lot of factors that have to come together. You have to really intend to do so and have that intention all the way to the end of the execution. If you really kill something in the middle of killing and then go, oh my God, what am I doing? The karma is already weakened. The same is true if you give. You give money and you think, oh, that was too much. Ooh. It's lost. I mean, some of it is lost, right? I mean, oftentimes we give something and we go, hey, that was a bit too much. 10 shekel would have been enough or something, right? So then it's already, we don't get the full result of having given, whatever it was. Or kindness, we're kind, but then we regret it all the way through. Whatever it is. So If we do a positive action, we need to make sure from beginning to end our intention is pure. Otherwise we lose out. Right? Okay. So these are all things to understand about karma. And they're kind of easy. But then there's something, and this brings us back to our discussion a little bit. Karma can have different effects. So there's one called a frictional effect, where the karma has a result, and once the result has started to manifest, you cannot change it. You cannot stop it. There's certain diseases, and it's very hard to determine which is a frictional karma and which isn't. But there's certain diseases, once you have them, you will not get rid of them. As long as you live, you have them. It's a frictional karma. And sometimes there's a disease that you can change, right? You can find a cure. That's not a frictional karma. What is it in Hebrew? Frictional karma.
במילה fruit?
Fruit, yeah, like fruit. In Tibetan it's the same. Like something that is ripened. It doesn't have much. It's just a name. Like a frictional means like number mimba in Tibetan, which means it totally ripens. Right? It kind of totally ripens, like a fruit. Yeah, like ripened karma. Yeah, ripening karma. And sometimes people call it fruitional karma. Because they also talk about a ripe fruit. Tibetans talk about a ripe fruit as like mimba. It's totally fruited. Well, it's not even a word. Yeah. So totally ripened karma. So there's this type of karma, you can't do anything about it. Certain karmas are like that. So sometimes you go to a lama, you go to a lama and you ask, you have this disease. And sometimes they tell you, no, it's that kind of karma, sorry. Just live with it. And it's easier. Then, all right, you don't jump from one doctor to the next. If you know that, then you know you need to live with it. And with my dad, I was kind of, maybe there's a cure. For all that Tibetan medicine that he would never take because it's too bitter. And in the end, I'm realistic. It's a frictional karma. As long as he lives, he'll have that. Right? But, there's other things we can do to make his life more comfortable, of course. Okay. Then there's another one. This is actually number 3, but because it's easy, I'll explain it first. So, the frictional effects could also be, let's say, the frictional effect of killing someone, being born in a certain realm. Being born in a certain realm, well, until you die, you're going to be in that realm. Right? I mean, it's not like, or let's say the frictional effect of something positive, you're born as a human. You're not going to become an animal before you die. Yeah? So you're in this situation, you're going to be in this situation until you die. That's a frictional karma. Being born in a certain realm, in a certain state of existence. And then you have also number 3 here, it's environmental effects. Not only is there frictional effects, but there's an environmental effects in the sense that the surroundings that you're born in could also be affected by that same karma. It could be one karma of having killed someone or having stolen something or having been generous, whatever. So you may, just depending on the karma, it may have the result of being born in a certain state, that would be the frictional karma. But on top of that, it may result in a certain environment you're born in. Let's say that same karmic result of having killed. In one lifetime, you're born in a hell realm. In another lifetime, another karma is responsible for you to be born human, but because the karma of killing is not totally exhausted yet, it gets you to be born in an environment where there's, not enough food, that people starve around you, where the food is poisonous, the water is poisonous. It's very difficult to keep alive. That is still an environmental effect of the karma of killing, even though the person is a human being. So being a human being comes from some other action. But there's an environmental effect now. So that's number 3. Number 2 is causally concordant effects. Causally concordant effects. Yeah, causally concordant effects. And there's a subdivision into 2. Causally concordant experiential effects and causally concordant behavioral effects. Okay? Causally concordant experiential effects. Can anyone translate this? Causally concordant behavioral effects. I'll try and explain it. Maybe then also the Hebrew becomes easier to understand. Behavioral. I mean, concordant effects, they're the action is in accordance with the action you've accumulated. It's concordant to that, it's similar to that, and it affects your behavior. And the other one affects your experience. So the example of killing, for example, let's take the example of killing. So the example of killing, there's different effects that this killing has. One time you're born in the hell realm, or maybe 2 or 3 times. Moreover, once you're not born in the hell realm anymore, once that fruitional cause, the ripening cause is kind of exhausted, you may still be reborn in an environment where it's very difficult to survive, even as a human. Having a different karma from a different action, being born as a human. But because of the karma of killing, you're now born in an environment that's very difficult for you to survive. Then on top of that, you may have causally concordant experiential effects where you're murdered before your time is up. Or you get sick with a disease and you're killed, even though the karma you have to stay in that human existence may be 50 years, but because that karmic result is now ripening, you die prematurely. That would be a causally concordant experiential effect. So not just the environment, but you actively get sick or you're killed. But then causally concordant behavioral effect means you like killing, because you've killed in the past. So this takes us also to this kind of habituation. Yeah? If we in the past somehow we've been killing, and you know how people like, the first time is very difficult, but then they describe it as getting easier and easier, and then people start enjoying it. I'm not just talking about humans. I mean, some people, yes, they kill, and it gives them some satisfaction at least. I mean, I've heard about this. And then I guess also butchers, for example. The first time it's probably difficult to butcher, a pig or a cow, whatever. And then after a while, it's like, yeah, let's get the butchering done. It's like your job, and you almost enjoy it. It's hard to imagine right now. Or a thief. The first time is kind of difficult. And then it's kind of enjoyable. Lying, stealing. And good things, of course, too. Compassion, too, right? You start enjoying it, being compassionate. I mean, it shouldn't let's just look at the negative. But this has, whatever act it is, I will get used to it. I will develop a habit. So causally concordant behavioral effect. Okay? All right. So this is basically another way of looking at it. And so this is a lot more complicated. So one karmic cause of killing or doing something else can lead us to having those results. Okay. But what is most important here? What's most important here to bring us back here, so to have a good understanding of karma, but what's most important is there's also one other way of looking at karma, and I've already mentioned it, but this is looking at it in a slightly different way. There's throwing karma. It's also called throwing, as in like throwing something, sometimes called projecting, it's called propelling. Yeah, it has different names, so projecting karma, propelling karma, throwing karma. It just has this kind of sense of like putting you somewhere. Which is, certain karmas are responsible for where we are reborn in the future. These are called throwing karmas. So an action, and it's very hard to say, is it just one action or is it more than one action? But behaving in a way that is associated with a certain realm. I mean, some people just behave like animals, right? I mean, in terms of, changing partners all the time, just like, that's what we associate, like, with the behavior of dogs sometimes, just from one to the next, one to the next. And so some people, like, kind of no concern for the other person, just having all sorts of different sexual relationships, just kind of living out that sexual urge, for example. Or, what else we associate with an animal kind of behavior, just sleeping and just enjoying sleeping, doing nothing more. That's also kind of what we associate with animal. But it's very hard to generalize here. But anyway, so certain behavior, that can leave a karmic seed for being reborn in certain other states. Or like the hell realm, if people like are killing and, enjoy killing and, perform all sorts of horrible things. And they're, serial killers and, people that engaging in genocides and so forth. So these people accumulate the karma that is, the stronger it is, the more it determines where you're reborn. So like the hell realm, for example. So this is called a compelling or propelling or projecting karma. So in Tibetan it's pempa, pinchigiri, it's just one term. In English there's different translations, which can be confusing, but can be helpful, because different words make it easier to understand that same aspect. But then, karma can also be, that same karma can also have the property of being a completing karma. Right? It could be the same karma, it could be different ones, it's very hard to exactly say. But there's also karma that's completing karma, which means, let's say, I have the completing karma to be born as a dog. Somehow my behavior was such that I be reborn as a dog. But then the completing karma could be that I'm reborn as a dog, a poodle in some rich family's house with pink toenails and, getting a spa treatment every week. I don't think that dog is suffering that badly, And then you could have a dog in Calcutta, or in some horrible city where, skinny and no food and everyone's just chasing it away and fear and, early death and so forth. So here, the propelling karma was something negative, but the completing karma can be also positive. It's almost like the compelling karma is like the outlines, and the completing karma is like filling in the picture. What kind of body one has, what kind of family one is born to, what kind of parents one is born to, where exactly. So as I said previously, with the environmental or the concordant experiential and so forth effects, they're kind of completing karma. Yeah. So they're not all, they're kind of, there's a common ground between these different types of karma. Yeah. So you're reborn in a certain state, as long as you have the karma to be human, you'll be human, right? But then there's other things, completing karmas. Okay. So this is the karma we're interested in, the compelling, the projecting karma. That's the one we're interested in. And it can only be virtuous or non-virtuous. Propelling karma can only be virtuous or non-virtuous. There's no neutral. Because we are reborn in any of the 6 states with propelling karma. Either we were born in one of the lower states, which implies certain degrees of non-virtue, or we are born in one of the higher states, as a human or as a celestial being. Okay? So the karma here sometimes is called meritorious, virtuous. I mean, it's the same meaning. It's actually virtuous karma and non-virtuous karma. But it's the technical terms here. When you want to talk about a virtuous throwing karma, you can say meritorious karma, and it's implied. You're talking about a virtuous throwing karma, or propelling karma. Just the term of the word meritorious karma. And then non-meritorious is the negative one. That's what we're interested here right now. Because it's somehow scarier. Because once that ripened, that's it. You're going to be stuck for however many years. As a human, maybe 70, 80 years. That's still, even though relatively short, it still feels pretty long. Yeah? Or in one of the other existences where, a day is much longer than a human day. You can be trapped for, thousands of years in one of the negative states. Even some of the positive states, even in a celestial realm, you can be trapped there for thousands, millions of years. It's nice, actually, it's a lot of happiness that you basically experience. But you just enjoy Larry-Fari kind of, not much space for spiritual development. So the human life is said to be so good because you have a healthy kind of proportion of suffering and happiness, both. Right? It's good to have some suffering, because it helps us to mature and have more compassion for others. But we also need a degree of happiness, a degree of space. Otherwise, we just suffer the whole day. We won't be sitting down to meditate. We need to, have some joy there too. So it's a good balance what we get on in a human existence. In the lower realms, there's too much suffering. Yeah? In the animal realm, for example, it's just survival. And then if you're a poodle with those pink toenails, what have you, with a spa visit, I mean, you just don't have that that discrimination that allows you to think, oh, I need to do something about my next life. It's just food right now, enjoyment right now. Okay? So, as a human being, this is the greatest kind of state we could actually achieve. And so it's important to understand that projecting karma. Yes?
What about being born in a pure realm, like in Taba's Pure Land or...
Okay, that is kind of extra here from the desire realm. Like, this is kind of different from being born in an uncontrolled state. So, if you're born in Amitabha's realm and so forth, I think it's still a propelling karma, but it's a good one. It's one that you really want to be born in. But it's still said to be better to be human, because it's so easy there to practice Dharma. Yeah, in the sense, it depends what you make with it, but it's harder to be a human being. Therefore, any practice as a human being is more effective, they say. It's more difficult to practice in the human realm. Therefore, the virtue you accumulate is much greater. Yeah. So, there's probably also some times where it's good to be born in a pure realm, but basically, the idea is the faster you want to go, from a tantric practice point of view, it's really, the subtle energy winds and the drops and so forth. The human basis is said to be the best.
Do you have to be an 8th-level bodhisattva to be born in a pure realm?
Depends on which pure realm. Amitabha's, no. But there's other pure realms where you have to be at least a first ground bodhisattva. Yeah? You have to be a first round. There's certain pure realms of, enjoyment bodies or sambhogakayas. There you have to be on the first ground. Okay, I don't want to explain this more further, so because for those of you who don't understand, just close your ears. Don't get confused. Okay, but basically the human realm is a pretty good realm, especially in those degenerate times. So the only good thing about being in degenerate times is if you do practice, it's so much more effective. Okay, it's so much harder. All right. But what I was trying to say was basically, okay, so we have this propelling, projecting karma that propels us to a next rebirth, and that is what is meant with action here. Okay? Completing karma is a little kind of easier because we can accumulate lots of completing karmas, and then one can counteract the other one. But once you're reborn as a human, well, as long as you live there, you're not going to commit suicide. You don't want to commit suicide. So that's a fruition of karma, and that's serious. Yeah? It's very important where we be reborn in our next life. Very important. Yeah? Because it makes the difference between a Dharma practitioner or not. Yeah? If something happens when we die, we're reborn, and we talk about what needs to happen when we die to make sure certain karmic results don't, right? But let's say we're reborn as a lion or a tiger, right? Out in the jungle, out in the, steppe somewhere. We're bound to have to kill. It's part of being this animal. So we accumulate a lot of negative karma. We may be trapped in a lot of negative states, and, all this practice we could be doing, we can't do. So it's very important in this state. Let's be realistic. Buddhahood in this lifetime, and even Milarepa did it in one lifetime, but he did a lot before that. They say he attained enlightenment in one lifetime because he entered the path in that one lifetime and attained enlightenment. But there's a lot of work before you can actually enter a path. Before you're ready to practice Tantra. You have to be very realistic. You cannot practice highest yoga Tantra without being a bodhisattva. Seriously? Cannot. Because when you want to practice highest yoga Tantra, you must take Tantric vows. In order to take Tantric vows, you must take Bodhisattva vows. And you can only take Bodhisattva vows if you're a Bodhisattva. Why otherwise is there a vow number 18? You break the Bodhisattva vow if you give up bodhicitta. If you've never had bodhicitta, how could you break vow number 18? Right? Anyway, that's just for the time. That's just on the side. I just want to stress this. We should do Tantric practice to keep imprint. So this is important. We should still look at it and be interested in, but understand this is not our main emphasis if we're not ready. Yeah. I certainly know, I'm really trying to be realistic, I'm not ready for Tantric practice, right? So my teachers may kind of encourage it to keep, get imprints, but for me, I know very effective are the very beginning meditations. Death and impermanent. It's much more effective than visualizing myself as being anything. Seriously, right? I mean, I'm just trying to be realistic, and I think we need to be realistic. But, anyway, I just want to get off here, but I just try to stress this because there's such emphasis on Tantra, yes.
Yes, now or later?
Later, okay, if possible. If you can keep it, wait. If there's something that needs clarification, then please ask now, because otherwise there's no understanding. But if we can keep it a little bit, yeah, let's talk about this. And this is a little important, actually, if it has to do with Tantra. But anyway, getting back to this, it's so important where we're going to be reborn. Yeah. So, as I said previously, don't just focus on this lifetime. Always take into consideration, I don't know what's next. Tomorrow or death? We just don't know. Yeah? So how can we make so many plans for tomorrow without knowing what comes next? Tomorrow or death? Yeah? We still can make plans for tomorrow, but we should also prepare for death. Because it's equally important to prepare for tomorrow and for death. Because either equally, it's 50-50, basically. So we should really divide our time, 50-50, death and tomorrow. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not saying totally give up this life, stop having a shower, you don't know when you're going to survive. No, still eat and clean and, do what you need to do, kind of, if I survive. But, if I don't, take that to mind. Because then we are prepared when it comes, and there's no fear, and there's no, and the time of death is so important. And this will become clear when we do this. But we're not there yet. Okay, so ignorance means out of a misunderstanding of reality, and of course all these steps in between, all sorts of delusions, so much is happening. Just think of your own experience. But here we're trying to be very simple. An action is accumulated. Here, the kind of action we're talking about is a compelling karma, right? With completing karma, it would work slightly differently. It's a compelling karma. It's a karma that cannot ripen in this lifetime. Completing karma can ripen in this lifetime, right? Anything happening could ripen even in this lifetime. But compelling karma cannot. Compelling or throwing karma cannot. All right. So then, if you create an action, consciousness was there before. But now, this action, when it ceases to exist, so an action is actually, action is really thinking a thought, doing something, or having a motivation to say something, or physically do something. So the moment we've done that, the moment we had that thought, that action is gone. But a seed is left. Something is left. This was her question before, when there's right, remember? Something must be left. And where is it left? On the consciousness. Right? This is what we take on to the next life. It's not left with the body. Because otherwise, all our karmic imprints gone when the body's gone. Right? No, it's left with the mental consciousness. Very important. So, what is number 3? It's that carrier consciousness. The carrier consciousness of that karmic seed. Okay? So let's say this is me. Ignorance, right? And then I accumulate an action that throws me into being a human. Alive in the future. But, and this is why you have the 12 links in that order, it is not necessary. Let's say I'm reborn as a human in the future life. I don't have to be reborn in the next life, immediately next life, as a human. I could be reborn as a dog. Okay? So, basically, there's ignorance, then there's an action left on my consciousness, and that, or action which means a seed of that action on my consciousness, and it's left on the causal consciousness. Then there's a line. The red line means death. I die. Okay? So number 3 is almost like half-half. It's like half a link here, half a link there. Okay? Otherwise you would end up with 13 links. Because you have a causal consciousness and you have a resultant consciousness. The causal consciousness, so let's say, I have that, being a human, that, a human, let's say, a human born in some country, New Zealand. Okay? So this karmic seed is left on my continuum. Now I die. So it's left on my causal, first on my causal consciousness. Cause just means in this lifetime. Then I die, and my consciousness leaves my body, and I'm born as a poodle. Yeah? I'm born as a dog in my next life. The karma that comes from me being born as a dog, that's a different matter. That's a different ignorance. Okay? That's not this ignorance. It's not that consciousness. This is where it's a little difficult. Like, yeah, it's like you have ignorance and action, and then the resultant consciousness is the result in a new life, and it's the result of a karma accumulated somewhere else. And the only reason we're showing this here, right? The karmic action here, that action has no kind of, it doesn't ripen in that second life. But the reason this is being illustrated this way is to illustrate that you can die with the karmic seed to be born as a human, but that you can carry it as a dog. And you carry it as a dog, and it may just ripen later on. Does that make sense? Yeah? So, there's another scenario where, I'll explain this later, how you actually have an action in the first life, and it's definitely, you experience it in the next life. But here's a different scenario. Here we're talking about 3 lifetimes. First lifetime, I accumulate the cause to be born human. Second lifetime, I'm born as a dog, but I carry that seed with me. And only at the end of my dog life does that karmic seed ripen to have life number 3. Okay? A new one, number 3.
As a human being.
As a human. Yeah, the one I accumulated in this lifetime. So let's just take me as an example. This lifetime, I accumulate the cause to be born as a human in New Zealand. Second lifetime, because of some other karma, I'll be a poodle. Right? However long poodles live. And then, just before death, something happens, and this is important, I'll explain this to you, that the karma that I accumulated in the first life, now that seed has remained, and the seed ripens in the second life. At the end of the second life, for me to be then reborn as the human in New Zealand, in the third life. Okay? This is what the 12 links tried to show us. I'll see it again. Absolutely. Okay. And we haven't gone through all the links, but basically, links number 1, 2, and 2.5. Yeah? So the causal consciousness. This is this lifetime to show us ignorance leads to an action, a compelling karma, which then leaves an imprint or seed, which is left on the carrier consciousness of this lifetime, called the causal consciousness. And that same causal consciousness then separates from me, from my body, and enters a new life, a poodle. A poodle ovum enters it. That's the resultant consciousness. Resultant just from the point of view of being the result of life number 1. Okay? The carrier consciousness. And then from there, the next step comes, I'll explain those, each one of them, name and form and so forth, and then all the way until number 8 and 9. Attachment and grasping. 8 and 9 as a poodle. 8 and 9 as a poodle. Grasping and attachment. Then they ripen the karma I've accumulated, number 2, but the seed is still there. That leads to the ripening of that karma, and number 11 and 12, I experience that result. Number 10 is existence. It's just the germinating of that seed. I haven't explained this yet, so I will. So this is just a quick run. So you know what to expect. You're not going to go, why? Why? Oh my God, that doesn't make sense. It is just to understand there's a different way of describing the 12 links in a different order. But here the purpose is to understand that you can have accumulated a karma as a human being, but you may be a poodle in the meantime, the karma doesn't get lost. Or you may have accumulated the karma of a poodle. You may be a human in your next life, but you can still be born as a poodle. Yeah? It continues on through another life. Better be careful. Yes?
Is it necessarily a propelling karma? Like that karma, the moment it's created, is it labeled, so to say, propelling and then dormant?
We just want to talk about a specific. Here, the 12 links, we're only discussing propelling karmas. You see? That's the example we take. It's not like...
It's not like I have two different warehouses, one for normal kind of
Ale.
things and one for propelling ones.
I don't know really. This is a little difficult. Is it one karma that has two effects, or is it two different karmas? That's a little difficult because it's really not something physical. Can I really count it as such? You know, like saying one and the same karma has different properties. Do you see what I'm saying? Is this your question? Yeah, so it's like there's one action. Let's say I have an action of killing, and that action of killing leaves something in my continuum, and it results in me being propelled as a certain being, but it can also have an environmental result. It can have all different results, that same karma, and not just once. Many, many times over.
But isn't what makes it propelling karma is the fact that it ripens at the time
Yes.
of death?
Well, no, it ripens as being responsible for you to be reborn as a certain being. Your completing karma can ripen at death, you know, the time of death too. You know, being born to certain parents. Yeah? Let's say when you die, you are born to some parents in Brazil. So to be born as being born as a human, that is the projecting karma. That definitely has to ripen at the time of death to then you're immediately reborn as a human. But also the completing karma of you having Brazilian parents, that better ripen too, because otherwise you end up without any parents. Yeah? So there's a lot of completing karma that is ripened too. The skin color, you know, your skin color, the city you're born in, the people, that's all the completing karma. So it doesn't make a completing karma, it's a bit like it fills in the picture. The projecting karma is the karma that is responsible for you to be one of the 6 migrators. Either human or animal or this, that. You see? From that point of view, we give it the name compelling karma because that is actually responsible for you to be human. For you to be, you know, a dog. For you to be... And then the circumstances of that dog, pretty, not pretty, you know, good parents, not good parents, good owner, not good, you know, where you're reborn, that's all completing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I'm missing something. What I'm trying to understand is that if I have a karma which is a propelling karma,
Yeah.
is the moment that karma is created,
Yeah.
will it sit and wait as
Yes,
a propelling
yes,
karma?
yes, yes, yes. They say the strongest actions, the stronger the action, the more likely it's to be a projecting karma. It's the stronger type of karmas. Now don't ask me, what is it exactly? That is difficult to decide, right? It's like this action, I just killed someone. Do I know it's a projecting or a propelling karma? A propelling or a completing karma? I don't know. But usually it's said the stronger the action, the more forceful the action, good or bad, the more likely it's going to be a projecting karma. Yeah, it has that potential to not just give you, you know, certain kind of facets that kind of complete your life, but really to determine where you're going to be for the next 70, 80 years, if not longer, or maybe even shorter. I mean, depending on what kind of karma it is. Does that make sense? Yeah? So it's like this is just a description about what is exactly which. You know, only someone with clairvoyance will be able to establish. Does that make sense? Lila? Does that make sense? Yeah? Seems like there was a question mark there, no? Anyway, I mean, we can discuss it further when we have the question and answer. But let's just say, and karma is so complicated. Of course, we can get into very, very difficult points here. But if you understand this much, I think that could be helpful. Okay? You can still ask again. So, let's say ignorance leads to an action. We can also do it in private, of course, if you find it difficult. We can also do it in private. So, ignorance leads to action. Action leads to the carrier consciousness, which then, when we die, that consciousness now is the continuum of the previous consciousness and is reborn as a person. You know, like the consciousness enters the ovum, as a human, for example. Okay? And then from there, and that doesn't last long, that resultant consciousness, because the moment the consciousness and the body have mixed, if you like, you have name and form. Okay? Which means, now, let's say it's me as a poodle. Yeah? So, I'm only saying, the consciousness is now the cause of name and form because it's that continuum. Because it doesn't just carry, it also has the poodle seed that ripened. You know, the poodle seed has ripened. So on the consciousness. So now the consciousness which has the human seed, at the time of the first lifetime, when I'm still a human, just before death, the poodle seed ripens. And so now the consciousness that still carries the human seed goes on to the next life. And the moment it enters, you know, this ovum, you start having name and form. Okay, what is name and form? Okay, we talk about usually 5 aggregates. 5 aggregates. It's just one way of saying what are the properties of a person. What are the properties of a person? So, oh wait, do I have to take a break? We started at 3. Yes, let's take a break. What time? Until what time are we going today? 5:30? Yes. Let's have a break. Just have a, yeah, I don't mind. So much easier to talk than to listen. Okay, so please take a break. Yeah.